All right. Your digital legacy, dealing with death in the digital world. Yes, it's morbid, I know, but we all have to think about it. We are going to go there. Just so that you know, this isn't actually a larger topic than I was prepared for. I thought this was going to be a slam dunk. This actually turns out to be quite a bit bigger than I was expecting. So this is going to be I'm going to give you a nice overview of what's going on, and then I think we're going to have a lot of question and answer time because this kind of gets to be a little bit deeper than I expected. Obviously, this is me. You've seen it 1,000 times now. And yeah, I don't know, I just found him on the net, thought he looked good, shoved him in there. That's the company. Obviously, you guys have seen this all before. I won't belabor the point. Quote from our fearless leader. No one wants to die. Even people who want to go to heaven don't want to die to get there. And yet death is the destination we all share. No one has ever escaped it. And that is as it should be, because death is very likely the single best invention of life. It is life's change agent. It clears out the old to make way for the new. So with this kind of thought in mind, I got into this entire presentation. And I started first thinking about, well, what is legacy? And what do we mean by having a digital legacy versus a regular legacy? What does this all mean? And what I came across is that the term legacy is kind of starting to go through a transition here. Back when your parents and your grandparents were thinking of a legacy, typically something that was traditionally a legacy was something that was tangible, okay? So these were assets, and usually a big asset was something along the lines of like a house, or property, or things along these lines. Legacies were also, a lot of times, money or financial investments and so on and so forth. And also, as I was going along, I was also thinking that there's other things that were a legacy. For example, you may have letters from a uncle or a grandparent or even a parent who went through, for example, Vietnam or the Great War or something like this, and that also could be a part of the legacy of your family and so on and so forth. But when it all comes back down to it, traditionally these things are all tangible things. These things we can all handle, and we can go through and so on and so forth, and we can bequest them and will them onto our next generation and so on and so forth. We're starting to see a change. We're creating a digital legacy, and our digital legacy is a lot more ephemeral. Here we are in the middle of our digital lives, and we have all these things that are just as important in some ways and define us the same way that some of these other things do, but none of them we can touch. We can't actually hold on to them. We can't do anything with them. For example, a digital photograph of my grandfather is every bit as important to me as an actual tangible photograph of my grandfather, but they are completely different. So what we're seeing is this transition is starting to happen where these items here, our intellectual property, our tweets, YouTube videos of our kids or whatever, digital photos, documents that we make, maybe even websites. Example, Derek has a website that he takes care of and maintains. That is part of his legacy. His children or other people may be interested in having all that information kept and recorded and all. And what we're finding is that these things are every bit as important as the other physical items. And we have to start thinking about the idea, okay, well, with a physical piece of paper, can easily last 100 years if kept safe. But is a digital photo going to make it 100 years? Not unless we do something about it, not unless we start thinking about how we're going to archive this, how we're going to take care of this. And what's even more difficult is the fact that because these items are so ephemeral, they are very, very easy to create. I can go out right now, take my camera, shoot 1,000 photographs, and store all 1,000 photographs. Well, back in the 100 years ago, you were lucky to get 1, maybe 2 photographs. So this meant the photographs from the ages ago were more valuable in some respects than the 1,000 pictures that I make right now. But who's going to weed through this? Who's going to deal with this now that we're generating all this stuff, and this stuff really belongs to us, and it's just as important. So it's something that I started sitting there kind of going, wow, we generate a huge amount of digital stuff nowadays, whatever that stuff is. And this is going to also, we want to hand this down, and it's also part of us and who we are and what our identity is. Unfortunately, the law hasn't caught up to us yet. U.S. law does not treat digital assets like physical ones that can be distributed according to a will. You cannot will your photograph collection. You can will a photo on a piece of paper, but those digital ones you cannot put in your will. There is nothing that is there. It doesn't have any value as far as the courts are concerned yet. On top of that, in 1986, Congress passed a law forbidding consumer electronics companies from disclosing the content of an owner's account without a government order or the owner's consent. The upshot of this is that the courts and companies have basically interpreted this to mean that a family can't force a company to let them have access to the deceased's data in their accounts. So all this stuff that's sitting up on YouTube, all this stuff that's sitting up on Flickr and so on and so forth, if that is your sole repository for all this digital stuff, you can be in a situation where your heirs can't do a darn thing to get this information back to them. It's there, and it's the companies that's there. On top of that, a vast majority of the end user license agreements specifically forbid the transferring of an account from one to another. So for example, we had recently, I think it was last year, 2 years ago, somewhere in that neck of the woods, a young man who was fighting in Iraq was communicating with his father via Yahoo. They were writing emails back and forth. They wanted to, he had expressed that when he got back, he wanted to create a scrapbook of all these emails and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, the son died in combat. The father then went to Yahoo and said, hey, I want to have access to this so that I can get his emails and I can put this information. And Yahoo said, no, too bad. It then went into court, and finally a judge took some pity on the father and basically said, look, Yahoo, you're going to give it to him, and Yahoo finally did turn it over. But there is nothing you can do legally to force this to happen. This is something that has to be done basically out of kindness of the judge's heart. So, as we talk about here, worst case scenario here, once your service provider finds out about a death, any and all data on their services can be wiped. Right there, bang, gone, over. There is no way for your heirs to force a judge or a service provider to do anything for them. And depending upon where you live, it may be illegal for your heirs to actually attempt to gain access to your machine or accounts. So this is kind of, I was kind of really surprised when I saw this because, of course, there's so much stuff out there. I may not have 100% copies of everything I've created. For example, comments on blogs or things like this, I wouldn't have any kind of a storage or mechanism where I have kept that sort of thing. Yet that is part of me, and that is part of who I am and what I do. So with this being here, there's a good chance that there will be certain parts of my legacy that is going to be lost once I am gone. So this kind of brought us up the question of, well, what are we going to do about this? How do we deal with this problem? None of us are getting any older, or younger, sorry. Yes, we are getting older. Whoops. So, I do too. Yeah, I really wish that was the case. I wish we weren't getting older. But the reality is we are. So what are we going to do? How can we handle this, and what can we maybe do to try and create some sort of a way to send our digital assets into the future with the rest of our assets? We're going to do a three-step process here at this point until the law finally catches up to this. First thing we're going to do is we're going to go and we're going to run an inventory. And we're going to find out where this stuff is. And it can be in a lot of different places. It's very surprising when you start sitting down and really thinking about it. Where do I have my assets? Where are things that are valuable to my heirs? Where are these things? Once we have figured out where the things are, then what we're going to do is we're going to create a disposition plan. We're going to be able to say, okay, here's where all of my photos are. I want these photos to go to these people. Or I want photos to be available to anyone who wishes to have access to them as far as the heirs are concerned. Whatever. Finally, what we will do is we'll formalize that plan. Even though it is not a legally binding plan, we will bring it to a point where it will, it may not be able to be forced, but you can at least you can get to the point where you can feel confident that your heirs are going to, your wishes are going to be fulfilled based upon what you're asking for here. So first off, you got to do a physical inventory. And this stinks, I know. Nobody likes doing physical inventory. But the reality is you're going to have to find all of your computers. And if you're anything like me, you probably have computers sitting in a corner somewhere that have information on their hard drives that haven't been touched in 20 years. But it's there. The data is there. You need to find these items. You need to figure out whether or not there's anything on them that is actually going to be worth looking at, dealing with, etc. Also, you need to find these things that I'm showing here because you are going to want to send them to your heirs. Somebody is going to want this physical piece of equipment. So figure out, where are your computers? Where are your iPads? Where are your iPhones? Do you have an iPhone 1? I do. It's being used as an alarm clock, actually. But it is an item, and it is something that has the potential to have data on it. Don't forget about your iPods. Back in the day, iPods, one of the cool things was that you could plug them in and use them as a USB drive and move data back and forth. Who knows what may be on your old iPod out there? Look for external hard drives. Look for thumb drives. Look for network-attached storage devices. Apple TVs, the first generation Apple TV, came with a hard drive. There may be things on there. You may have your kids' images, or not images, but movies of your children or your whatever, maybe hiding on a first generation Apple TV. Now once you, yeah, go ahead.
How about old VCR tapes?
Well, VCR tapes to some extent, yeah, but of course, once again, the problem with that is, that comes to another issue, which is how do you deal with longevity of this? Because of course that's a piece of magnetic media that was never extremely stable to begin with. And we can, if you'll throw that back out at me at Q&A, we can talk about how to deal with some of that as well. Physical inventory. Once you've figured out where all these things are, this is all tangible personal property. So this means it's all going to be disposed of via your will. The data on these items is not legally covered in your will. The data is going to be part of your digital legacy, and it will be it can be disposed of by a digital executor. Let's try that again. Executor, per the plan we're making here, okay? So it's the idea here is that we are going to try to separate the digital content from whatever it is on, pass the item on to the whoever wishes, the physical item on, and then take those digital assets and give them to people who it makes sense to give them to.
What if your kids don't want any of this stuff?
Which is perfectly possible. And once again, at that point, you don't really necessarily care. However, I would say this. There's a lot of people who will say, whatever, I don't really care. And they say that today. And they also say it a lot of times, too, when the hurt is too new. I never want to, we've all had our hearts broken in one way or another, and then you rip up the love letters or whatever it is that, that was there, and I'll never go back to that again or whatever. But 20 years goes by and you happen to find one in a drawer and you go, oh yeah, I remember that. And it doesn't hurt anymore and it's not such a big deal, and you kind of maybe look at it and go, it's okay, and maybe we put it back in the drawer or something. So just because they say, I don't want it today, I don't want it right now or whatever, don't necessarily take them at face value. You may want to store a few things in a few, maybe even 100 pictures. Me as a boy, me as I was an adult, me as I grew older, stuff like this. And maybe your son or daughter doesn't want it, but your grandson might. And some of these other, other people may be more interested in that. have it around. It doesn't take anything to keep this sort of stuff. Another option too, in the case of, for example, photos, right? We've got 4 billion photos. Go out, make yourself an Apple photo book, take the best 100 photos. That's it. Get rid of all the rest of it. Don't worry about it. Say, here it is. If you don't want it, that's fine. Just keep it on your bookshelf, because somebody down the road is going to get curious about great-great-grandfather whatever, and that's going to be there for them. So those are a couple thoughts there. Moving on, once we find the actual physical hardware, now we got to go in, we got to find the actual digital information. And of course, this is just me sitting here for about probably 15, 20 minutes. If you think about it, there's probably a list at least 3 or 4 times this length when you really start thinking about where your stuff may be hiding. Remember zip disks, floppy disks? I know some of you have floppy disks out there. I've talked to you about it. Also, don't forget about airports and time capsules, right? We think of these things as being backups and so on and so forth, but they are network attached storage locations. If you have an old time capsule that you upgraded and just kind of threw the old one in the closet, there may be a ton of old data that's sitting there that you're thinking, oh, gee, I'll plug it in. Hey, look at that. Oh, there's the, whatever, picnic or whatever. Also, CDs and DVDs. I know you all have CDs and DVDs out there, and Blu-rays and stuff like this, physical, actual hard disks and so on and so forth with stuff flopping around on them. iCloud, of course, especially nowadays because we have photo streaming. So iCloud gets a ton of pictures, everything you shoot off your thing. If you've turned on photo streaming off your mini or your iPad or your phone, they all go up into iCloud nice and quietly. They can all be stuck there. Websites and domain names. If you're like me, you have a website and a domain name. These things need to be found out, and we need to figure out who is actually in control of them. In my case, for example, my domain is actually controlled by GoDaddy, whereas my website is actually hosted by a completely different company. So my heirs need to know these things and know where this stuff is, and need to be able to know whether or not they're going to be maintained after I die. Obviously, email, social media, blogs, PayPal, and e-commerce sites. Remember that PayPal and e-commerce sites probably have access to your bank account and or credit cards. Whoever is going to take care of this being this digital data, you want to make sure there's not going to go on there and empty your account after you're dead. You want to make sure that they are going to be somebody who is trustworthy. So you figure out where all this stuff is. And what you're going to end up doing is you're going to come back to a basic spreadsheet. And you're going to start slapping this stuff down. This is the assets of Chris Barsis. My executor is my wife. This is the name of the asset. It's an iPad Air. Content, apps and pictures of my wife and kid. Access, location, it was probably on me at time of death. There is no username for this, and I don't have a PIN, so there is no password. Instructions. I'd like the thing wiped, and I would like it given to my son. Any notes? No notes. Keep on going. For computers, it's my iMac. Content, the pictures, all family pictures, numerous documents, and so on and so forth. What are we going to do with the pictures? Okay, instructions. These are my instructions for the pictures. These are my instructions for the documents. These are my instructions for everything else. Do whatever you like with them, however you want to go. Email. I have a Gmail account. Okay, what I would like to have happen with my Gmail account? Close the account, take anything you want off first, close the account, get rid of it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you start going down this, you start listing off, what do you want to do with this stuff? What's going to happen to it? And where do you want to go with it?
What did you create that with?
Actually, that is the original of that comes out of a book that I will talk to about. But this particular thing, what it is, I took it off of Excel, dropped it into Numbers, pulled it from Numbers into Keynote, and then colored the cells inside Keynote.
So is it possible that we could get that from
Yes, you most definitely can. And there is, like I said, there is a book that I'm going to recommend at the end, and he has a lot of these kind of templates and other things that are already pre-built. I did actually scavenge this off of him, and then just kind of made it prettier because it was Excel, you know. So there are some gotchas, though, out there to this whole thing. When it comes to devices, okay, so I'm talking about computers and things like this. Most of this is about your computer. If your Mac is protected with an open firmware password, okay, some of you may have, some of you may not, kind of depends. A lot of this type of thing happens in a situation where there's been a divorce or something like that, that gets put on, or if it's a high security situation at an office or whatever, an open firmware password gets put on. If you do have this, you must make sure that password gets sent to your digital executor, because here's what's going to happen. Without that password, you pretty much can't wipe the system unless you're going to yank the hard drive out of it, and even that causes problems. It's pretty much a real mess to get into the machine without that particular password. So if you've got one, make sure you give it to somebody, or that it's written down somewhere in this group of, you know, this on our spreadsheet here. Make sure that sucker is written down somewhere on there so that your executor knows what that is. At least all the way up to 10.6, I can't say anything, or sorry, 10.9, I can't say anything for 10.10, although I'm guessing it probably will not be there. There is a way to set up what's called a master password. This goes all the way from back to 10.6, if I remember correctly, is where that started. No, 10.5, because it came in on the first file vault. What's neat about the master password is once you have set the master password, you can actually use it to open the computer up if you forget the main password. So, for example, if you want to have a situation where you want to have your account and you only one account and it's your information that's locked, you can have just one account on there, place the master password into our file, and when your digital executor comes along later to try and get everything squared away, they could then log in using your name and the master password and actually get in. The other option, of course, to do that would just be to create a separate account that is an admin level account on the box, and then you'll be able to get in as well. Also, do not forget, you've got to get down the passwords to any of your encrypted hard drives or partitions. Anything that may be encrypted out there, Apple cannot get into it. So if you don't have the passwords and the passwords aren't written, everything is basically going to have to be thrown away at that point. If you are planning to use File Vault 2, which is the full disk encryption for the Mac, you're going to want to try and consider setting it up so that the recovery key is kept separate from the machine. I'm not going to go into that massively. There is a nice knowledge base article right there on how to set this up. It is very propeller head. The reason I suggest doing this is because if you keep that key separate, for example, on a thumb drive that is then placed in the fire safe or someplace else where your digital executor can get to it, even if they do not have the original decryption key, they can go in at that point and recover the information off this drive. However, if you have this encryption key already encrypted on the encrypted hard drive, it becomes nearly impossible, at which point you have to hope and pray that the person who set it up told Apple to hold the key. If they didn't hold the key with Apple, that's pretty much the end of it. Your digital executor needs to know what to do with any adult content. Yes, I know, it's there. There are more than one time when people have died and then their loved ones have come across their fetish with goats or whatever. Be sure that if there is anything like that, that it is placed somewhere where your digital executor knows that this stuff needs to go away before your heirs have a chance to find out about your deviation, let's call it. Also, don't forget, everybody, lately we've seen this new thing with the 4-digit PIN that pops up on the front of your iPads and iPhones and all, and that's Apple's new thing. Yeah, that little, no, it's not necessarily the password, it's that 4-digit PIN. Have you seen that on your iPhone or iPad? Some of you have. Generally speaking, it pops up because of you're doing keychain sharing, or I think it also just pops up now whenever you put a brand new one in. Is that right, I think? Yeah, I think it is. It basically, Apple suggests this because without this this pin in place, you cannot just walk over to the machine, go over to users and go, up, erase everything, and then, woohoo, I got a new iPad. You have to have that pin. Well, of course, that is a double-edged sword because if you don't know what that pin is, you can't wipe the iPad and give it to little Joey, who's the person who's supposed to have it in the death of somebody. So make sure those pins are written down because they are a pain in the butt to deal with. Files. It's useless to store something if there's no way to look at it in the future. Think about Appleworks, folks. I know some of you have Appleworks files out there. Those are going away. There's getting harder and harder to deal with every time. If you don't get those things converted into something else, you will lose them at some point in time here.
Having just run through one element, I had some keynotes. And the keynote's not that old, but I had some that wouldn't open in the current version because they were early keynotes. So I thought, well, no problem. I'll go and install the old keynote, which I still have. And I installed just fine. It would run just fine. However, the Apple website for you to enter the code, registering it, is no longer there.
Yep.
So you could not register that old software, which meant I had this huge hassle to get around that in order to get an old version in order to upgrade the files so that the new version can use them. The moral of the story is upgrade.
Yes.
It comes out, or you can lose the access to your own file.
Exactly. There's even things like, and I was thinking of it as you were talking, and now I've lost my train of thought. Dadgummit. Rats. Yeah, I'll come back to me, I'm sure. But yeah, these sorts of things. Oh yes, Adobe products, right? We've now gone from the physical disks to Creative Cloud. I have one client who has a piece of software that is an absolute requirement for them to run. They can run it under 10.7. Okay, great, this is wonderful. We can put it onto Parallels, make a Parallels disk of 10.7. He can run it in 10.7. He goes to install it. Oh, surprise, the installer for the program that works perfectly fine under 10.7 is a PowerPC program. You have to install it under 10.6. Parallels doesn't run under 10.6. So you have to create this whole new hard drive to go to 10.6 to register one item, and then forward it to 10.7, and then put it in, and it was another 4.5 hour insane, crazy thing because of a simple thing of being so old and not having it been upgraded and so on and so forth. So if you have documents that are out there and you're thinking to yourself, yeah, I want to keep these in such a way so they can be readable, .txt, text files are awesome. They will be available and readable probably forever. Also, yeah?
Don't you lose your formatting?
I said text. I didn't say format. Yeah, that is text. And that is exactly what is going to happen. You will get the raw text, but you will not have the formatting there that you may have had under a Word doc. If it's rich text is not bad, but there are still things that you cannot do. For example, if somebody's taken a text box and slapped it in the middle and wrapped around it.
But in general, I suspect rich text will also be around.
Yes. Convert your old documents into new formats, from doc to docx, or as Charles was saying, get your old keynotes and bring them up into the new world if you want to plan on keeping them. If the look of the document is more important than its editability, save it as a PDF or graphic file. PDFs can be read by almost every single machine out there, including our iPhones, our iPads, pretty much everything, Linux machines, etc., etc., etc. JPEGs and TIFFs can be read by almost everything. So you can generally get an idea where if it's, I have a form, I've created this form in Appleworks, it works fine, I just want to be able to print it forever, turn it into a PDF. It will be perfectly fine to leave there. If you have database or spreadsheet data, you can save that as a tab delimited or a comma delimited text file. This data format can be imported in new spreadsheets or databases. Besides using it as a mechanism for upgrading to the future, tab and comma delimited text files are fantastic. Anytime that you want to move data around between things, tab files and CSV files are great. For example, let's say you have a list of customers, like I do, and I want to send my list of customers a email through MailChimp. I say, okay, customers, go in here, suck out the first name, suck out the last name, and their email, put it in a comma-separated text. Go into MailChimp. MailChimp, import this comma-separated text. Whoosh. And now MailChimp has all the data that I had out of my contacts, and then I can send my stuff along. So CSVs are not just purely for the idea of keeping things, data fresh, but it also is a great way to transport data, move data around. You'll see it all the time on these things. All right, how about email? Remember, unless you're hosting your own server, you are subject to the provider's terms of service. So once again, also, if we slip over to the other side here, that's kind of a corollary over here. Do not mix personal and business email. Your employer has control over everything sent through their server. Instead, forward the email to your personal account and then answer from there. Yeah, Charles. Also remember that iPads and iPhones are not easy to archive or save from. They're kind of a pain in the butt. So if you have email that you're only receiving on the iPhone or the iPad or whatever, you're going to want to see if there is some other form that you can receive that in. For example, if you are, let's say, using Gmail, you could then use the Gmail off of the website, for example, or even iCloud. You could use the iCloud's email over there. In this case, that way you would be able to go in to those sites, pull that data out, and bring it to you locally so that you can have a copy if there is something in there that you wish to save for your legacy. If it's purely coming into the iPhone or the iPad, it becomes a real annoyance. There are ways to get it done. There are a few programs you can plug in and get it to actually start pulling off the machine, but much better if you have something that you can actually get to from another place. Yeah?
One thing that I find is real simple on the iPad or the iPhone is to just take a screenshot of it.
Certainly,
And
yeah.
And especially then if it's kind of small print, because you can you're spread it out. And so I find myself doing that a lot on the iPad and the iPhone.
Yeah, screenshots make perfect sense to do for these sort of things if you're going to save something real quick. I find myself, especially on the desktop machine, I will make PDFs and then save them so that I can see them on my iPad. These sorts of things, you know, there is functions inside Apple Mail to do mail archiving. You can save them as text or you can save them as PDFs. Which brings me down to, I think, where's that? Yes, number 3 over there. If you're archiving or saving a message, try to save them as text or as a PDF. So there's that. And if you happen to be somebody's digital executor, do not tell the provider that the account holder is dead until you're done. I mean, it may seem, you know, pretty obvious, but once they find out that you're dead, your account becomes their property, basically. So depending upon what that end user license agreement, what that terms of service are, can dictate a lot of issues and whether or not you're going to have issues with saving any of this stuff. So now that we've gone through all that, let's formalize this plan and turn it into something that may help us get what we actually want out of life, which is for our digital assets to survive into the next generation. First off, we're going to have to find some way to store this listing of inventory and the instructions of what we want to have happen. There are a lot of ways to store things. We'll talk about a few of them here, but it does not have to be anything grandiose. It can be something very simple, even as something simple as I'm going to set this fire safe aside over here, and inside this fire safe is going to have the instructions, and this key is going to my lawyer, and I have in my will that this key goes to somebody. It's a physical item that can be inherited. That somebody knows, aha, that key goes to this box over here. Click, I'm now the digital executor. Trigger. We need to have something that triggers this plan. There are actually services that will sit there and send you emails or whatever, and if you stop responding, they send out email to somebody like, hey, Bob isn't responding anymore. Is Bob still alive? You know, and so on and so forth. You need to figure out who's going to be your digital executor, And this is a person who's going to distribute or delete assets based upon that instruction and inventory that you did up in number 1. And then the heirs are the people who are going to receive these assets as we go along. So, one of the first things you got to do is you got to talk to people, right? It really does absolutely no good to create a plan for these digital assets and so on and so forth if you don't tell anyone you've got a plan. You know, if I come and, you know, you're dead, somebody says to me, well, Chris, I need access to the machine because I've inherited this machine. I go, oh, okay, fine. Wipe out the passwords, wipe the drive, hand it back to the person, and, well, he's got the machine. But everything on it is gone now, and all your wishes are right out the window with him. So talk to your heirs. Let them know that there is a plan for these things, and that way they have a chance to tell you, oh, you know, I really wish we had pictures of Grandpa, or I really wish we had some of this other things, or, oh, you know, hey, Dad, you know, you did this presentation or whatever, I'd like a copy of that, or whatever they want to do. Designate somebody to be your digital executor in your will or trust and provide them with information on how to gain access to your plan, okay? Now, once again, they do not have the same legal authority as a regular executor, but they are there to try to give you, to help you execute your wishes as you go along. One of the neat things about digital assets is, unlike Aunt Edna's salt shaker, where there is only one and there always will be one, it's a lot less fight over digital assets because Johnny wants one. Okay, fine, here, Johnny, you can have one, and oh, you can have one, and you can have one, and everybody can have one because it's all identical and the same. Just because you've created a copy hasn't diminished it or changed it in any way. So if everybody knows what's happening and you have a good executor, hoo-yah, you're in a lot better shape. Okay, yeah, go for it.
If you own a domain,
yes.
is that considered a tangible asset? Because that's not something that can be given to multiple people because it's owned. I'm thinking in terms of, you know, people that run a business or something where it's a recognizable brand name.
Yeah, see, what you're going to run into there is the smart move on that one is to incorporate. Because then you would put the domain under the corporation's name. The corporation is a perpetual entity, at which point you are safe at that point because the corporation becomes the owner of the identity, which in this case would be the domain name. If you're in my case, however, where I am not a corporation, I'm a sole proprietor, then what would have to happen is you would have to be able to give somebody, an heir, the information and then not tell your domain people. And generally speaking, the domain people don't care as long as the money keeps coming in. You know, if you keep paying, they'll just keep on going. It doesn't really matter to them that much. One of the neat things that they talk about right now in the book I'm coming to here in a moment is the fact that the web is kind of ignorant at this point. They don't know that you're dead until somebody tells them you're dead. So if you can give your heirs or your digital executor a way to have access, they can go in and quietly do whatever they need to do and then give them, inform them that you're now dead after the fact that they've gotten what they want out of it, whatever that happens to be. So, you know, what you don't want is you don't want to have that basically trumpeted all over the universe, I'm dead now. Now this is going to change. Let's just be honest here. More and more public records are getting shoved up on the internet every single day, and there is no reason why death records are not going to get up there sooner or later, and there's no reason why companies are not going to go and mine that information and know pretty quick that you're a goner. At which point, hopefully, the laws will have changed to the point where we'll be able to do something more legal than what we're doing right now. Let's see here. What else? Oh yeah. Do not place user IDs, passwords, or any account information in your estate plan because it becomes public record. Once again, just like Charles was saying, once it has been read, it's public record. So don't put your account names and your account user IDs and so on and so forth. They could be read by other people who you're not interested in having it read by. This is also why you can't put things into your will. Like, for example, I want to give these assets or these things to these people. It all gets looked at, and if you have the information right there, user IDs and passwords, Other people will scam in before your heirs do, and hoo-yah, you've got just a nightmare of trouble. Your digital executor has a great deal of power. Be very careful whom you trust, obviously. Your digital executor needs to be a technically savvy person. It doesn't do any good to designate somebody who is trustworthy if they have less computer expertise than you. Kind of obvious as well. You can save your heirs a lot of heartache and pain by designating a trusted third party to be your digital executor. For example, there was a young girl who died of, I believe it was colon cancer, 16 or so. Her parents had to fight to get her computer and the information off of her computer. When they did, they found that there were some documents on there and so on and so forth that she had written when she was going through some very low points in her life. And it was very disturbing and painful to them. A third-party person can look at this and go, okay, look, we're going to save these documents. We're going to put them over here in a file that's called have some time before you look at it. Let some time go by before you look at it. You know, that way you have had a chance to do a little bit of healing, and you are not necessarily getting one grief compounded on top of another, compounded on top of another. Obviously, also the digital nice part I think about a third party is, of course, once again, as we go back to the whole GOAT issue, they can then distribute and get rid of that information and get rid of the stuff that may not be something that you are necessarily interested in sharing with your heirs. Okay, so this has kind of been a whole lot of information dumped at you, and I'm sure there's probably a few of you out there that are looking at this and going, wow, what the heck now? First thing I would like to tell you about is this is a nice book. I got a majority of the information from there, and he's got another 200 and some odd pages of good information in there. There's a lot of good food for thought sort of information. It's called Your Digital Afterlife: When Facebook, Flickr, and Twitter Are Your Estate, What's Your Legacy? It is available on the Apple iBook store, so anybody with an iPad can purchase it. It's cheaper, actually, on the bookstore. And you can also order it through Barnes & Nobles. Like I said, it's pretty much the main textbook, that and a few articles for the entire speech here. It was pretty well done by this gentleman. There are websites, as I alluded to. There is a few websites that are out there. You can Google them for triggering, so basically, are you still alive? The two that are big out there right now for the whole kind of digital legacy thing is Legacy Locker, which has now been bought out by PasswordBox, and Secure Safe. PasswordBox is a Mac iOS application that ties up to the cloud. And so as you go along through your life and you start adding new passwords and new things and so on and so forth, it stores them there on the assumption that you will have a password that you give to your digital executor, which then opens that and then allows them to go in and start making, adjustments and changes.
Similar to 1Password?
I'm coming to that one. Yeah, actually. It is very similar to that. The only difference is, of course, I'll hit you in a second on that one. PasswordBox is free at the moment. I don't remember if there is a limit. Secure Safe is actually done by a group out of Switzerland. They also do the same basic thing. In addition, they have the ability to where you can actually create little folders and little areas where you can say, okay, all the information inside here is for Sam, and you can put in pictures or documents or whatever, and it's stored in there, and then of course will be then distributed by your digital executor. If you want to do it on your own, 1Password. I use 1Password, love 1Password. It's an encrypted password locker. You have plugins for every browser out there that we're currently using. Native Mac, PC, and iOS application. You can sync the information between iCloud, Dropbox, Wi-Fi, and iTunes. It's fantastic. It does the same basic idea. So what you have is a single password that opens up this locker of where all the other passwords are. So your digital executor would get instructions that say, okay, go to my computer, fire up 1Password. The password for this is going to be this, and now you have access to all my other passwords that are in there, and you can then start doing my instructions and going on and so on and so forth. Love it. works fine. The beauty part behind 1Password is as you change, it notices it and starts making, says basically, hey, is this supposed to be changed or is this a brand new password combination? And you can just say, yeah, that's an updated one, and off it goes. iOS, or not iOS, but the 10.9 Mavericks is also trying to do the same sort of thing. It's not quite as nice as this yet. I have a suspicion that at some point this program is going to end up being more or less run over by Apple and how they're doing things. They're doing things with their keychain through iCloud. Not a shabby setup. What I have noticed, though, 1Password has a lot more capability from the standpoint of saying stuff like, okay, I want to store not just a password, but I want to store a document that is also encrypted, or I want to store some instructions that are encrypted, or I want to store things like, for example, well, in my case, I just did one for my FedEx account number. That's not really something that is usually a keychain sort of thing. Keychain's really about user ID and password. But I need to store that information because at some point in time, that FedEx account is going to have to be closed if I die. Somebody's got to deal with it. This is the password, the account number, and la la la. It's a good, solid place to keep it. Also, what's kind of nice, of course, is that if I am all out on the road somewhere or whatever, and I need to send something via FedEx, I just pull it up on my iPhone and go, oh yeah, it's a 444, la 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 la, and off I go. Which, of course, iOS and the Mavericks can't do yet. But it is happening, and it's going to happen, become more of a, I think it's going to end up becoming more pronounced. There are numerous applications out there to help you inventory things. Okay, we talked about the fact that we're going to need to inventory our equipment. We're going to need to inventory where things are. You can use the lovely spreadsheet. That works really good. Another option here is something like Delicious Library. I like Delicious Library because basically you can organize any of your physical assets into one place. It does connect. Oh, it connects. Hey, that's kind of a nice one. It connects to Amazon to give you pricing information. Gee, I can't spell anything right, can I? There is a native Mac and iOS applications. The iOS application is only for getting information into the Mac application. It does not have your complete inventory in there. But you can use a wireless barcode reader or that iOS application to actually scan items in. So for example, you have a whole bookshelf full of stuff. You just go blip, 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 and it starts going, hey, this is this, this is this, this is this, and you start shoving it into your system. Kind of nice, especially when it comes to tracking physical items. Now, even though we're tracking physical items, we're still going to have to make up a little sheet that says basically, hey, you know, this is what we want to do with our content, but at least it's half the problem down, and it's a lot faster than sitting there and typing in one by one. All right, and finally, me. I'm here to help. So if there is questions or whatever, and you want to try and set up a digital asset estate plan, or you want to have a third party as an executor, I am here to help. We can talk about that and so on and so forth. Yes. You guys don't do 100 words per minute dictation? I mean, come on now. Actually, we... Third point of page. I'm going right back to it. Here I am going to, part of the deal here is I'm hoping that I got a good recording of this, and I'm going to put this presentation along with the voice up there and hope that this comes up nice and pretty and all. Probably the best solution or the best answer to that question is the book is worth the $15. Pick up the book because literally everything that I have talked about is in there somewhere. The only things that are not in there is when I talk about things that are specific to the Mac, like for example the open firmware passwords and stuff like that. And of course, like I said, I'm hoping this will pop up on my website and you guys can then look at it and stop it and pause it and do stuff like that. But that's pretty much it. From what I've gotten. Like I said, that's a pretty fast breeze over. The gentleman who wrote the book put in quite a few other ideas and things that I didn't even have a chance to look at and talk to you about. So let's just throw it open. Questions? Yeah?
Another question. assuming that your wife is not a techie type person, who or where do you go to try and find a digital executor or something?
That was the last slide. You know, one slide back. One slide back. Yeah. Obviously, you know, I can do that. Can do that. I was talking to the group down at Apple, and they were specifically stating the business guys were saying, because I was telling them I was giving this talk tonight, and they're like, "Holy cow! What would we do? Because we can't." You know, if you brought the machine in and said, "Oh, my wife's dead. I want to get into this," they're like, "Well, I'm sorry. You know, we can't do anything about this." Apple does have a mechanism to handle certain things if you can show a death certificate and so on and so forth, but it's certainly above the level of the local store that it has to go to. So you're going to have somebody that can help you locally. Obviously, I volunteer, you know, as a potential you know, person. Other questions? Yeah.
I mentioned earlier the
VHS tapes. How do we deal with VHS tapes? Yep, that's a good question. Okay, there's a couple of things we can do with VHS tapes. I don't actually have complete control of this machine. There's a company called Elgato, E-L-G-A-T-O. They make a unit, I think it's a hybrid 25, if I remember correctly. It's hard to pull that one off my head. There's two units they make. They make one unit that is purely a USB-driven unit, and I believe it's Elgato, yeah, hybrid something or other. That's not the one you want. What you want is the other one. Okay, there's two of them here. I'm going to tell you there's two. One's USB, plugs in. You don't want that one. You want the other one, and the difference is the other one is electrical powered. It'll say, you know, this one comes with electrical power and so on and so forth. It's also a bigger box. Okay. The reason you want that one is because that one there has the ability to connect up an S-video source, right? So all of those analog tapes and so on and so forth that you have more than likely have an S-video out. You would then go S-video out into the Elgato box, hit your thing, turn it on over here, and just basically it's a one-to-one shot. There's no extra speed.
You're playing the VCR on a VCR player.
Yep.
Goes into the box, then into your computer.
Yep, it's basically an analog to digital converter is what happens. The big bummer about that, though, is that you're in real time. So if you've got a 1-hour tape, you got to wait an hour. There's no way around it. So if you've got a very large library, it could take quite a while. Other things maybe that might want to be dealt with. Slides, old 8mm tapes, things along these lines. There are, I believe Costco and I believe some other places have conversion processes to get these things into a digital form. Yeah, I believe they also do VHS, you're right. Those sorts of things can be all gotten into digital content. Of course, once it's in digital content, you then have to keep it up, keep it stored. Things to also remember too, hard drives have a finite life, even when they're turned off. It's a magnetic item, okay? Burned DVDs and CDs, these are not archival either. They're generally 5-ish or so years before they start conking out. Storing data and keeping it for long periods of time really becomes an issue that you have to proactively keep up with and keep going with. Because frankly, over time, even as short as a time as 5 years, I mean, you know, we were just talking about Keynote here. That's easily within the last 5 years, and you know, bang, you could be stuck without being able to access something. So, yeah.
Another thing with the VHS tapes, if you use Groupon at all, they oftentimes have things on there that are get 3 VHS tapes done for $20.
Oh, that's good.
Which is much cheaper than the others.
Yeah.
And some of them are like Scan Digital. There's a couple different companies. Some of them you can actually physically take your stuff to their place. They might be in La Jolla or Mira Mesa or whatever. Or you can mail it if you're comfortable enough with the mail service. And we've done that with a lot of the old. We took all the photos out of the photo albums and got that all done and then sent the tapes. And when you get down to figuring out how much you're paying for it, you realize you don't have that many you didn't need to convert.
Yeah.
You know, there's not that many that anybody cares about.
The device, is way cheaper. Yeah.
Yeah, now that's another thing. Like, for example, a slide reader.
You have to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, but or just the need. I'm a teacher, and all the school's official video stuff, the videos in the science kit, you know, that kind of thing. They literally gave them to us on VHS tape, and at the time when nobody had a VHS player because we already moved on to DVD. And so for a while I was digitizing them and then burning DVDs. And of course today I realized I don't even want to do that. I just have digital files on the hard drive, pop them onto the iPad and project them on the wall. But sometimes it's very worth buying a device to do that, simply because when you need it done, you need it. And you don't want to wait 2 weeks while you mail it to somebody who digitizes it and then mails it back to you. And you know that the convenience of having it, and then you can rent it out to your friends.
Hey, there you go. Yeah.
The other issue I have with the companies that convert the VCR tapes,
Mhm.
they put them on DVDs.
Yes.
Okay, I want to be able to edit the digital files.
Yeah, you want it.
And
Yeah.
so I want to be able to work with them.
Yeah. Yeah, because the problem, of course, with that, yeah, because of course, obviously, the problem with that, for those of you who haven't had this, issue that you've had to work with, VHS tapes are very low quality to begin with, and then if you bring them in and compress them into an MPEG-2 file that works on a DVD, and then yank them off of there and attempt to try and work with them, and then compress them again, you've compressed it so many times that it just turns into this pixelated garbage mess, and it's just so not worth it. You are much, much better off going with a one-generational, straight from VHS right into a file that you can edit, and then keeping it that way, keeping that pristine file versus having to go back and forth through all that extra compression. Compression is your enemy. You don't want it if you can avoid it. Other ideas, questions? Yeah?
Well, not exactly a question, a statement. If you have a wife who doesn't quite get the techie stuff, sometimes it's because husbands have a hard time teaching wives.
Which is true, yes, absolutely.
So your wife might really enjoy getting techie.
Yes.
If you get one of these lovely people to help them, they might really get on the bandwagon.
And this happens quite a bit. I do have more than one client who their husband is a very intelligent person who understands this stuff really good, and for whatever reason, they end up bickering and sniping at each other and can't do it. And I'd come in and I show them the exact same thing the husband showed them, and they get it, and everything's beautiful, wonderful, and the husband goes, "Wow, that's great. Why didn't you learn that when I did it?" And, then it starts another fight. But yeah, it's totally true. It's surprising that when it is a third party, sometimes that's all it takes. Because there's been whatever friction, or it's just a different way of learning, or somebody has a different way of explaining. So yes, definitely. Yeah, Joe.
This one, it seems obvious, but it's amazing how often people don't do it. And that is, with a lot of these digital assets, you can give them away before you die.
Oh, very true. Absolutely.
That was something, I had this, my grandfather, when I was very young, gave me certain things, said, "I want you to have these, and who knows what will happen after I die." And ironically predicted, because he had remarried and the second wife absconded with stuff. But it struck me that it makes sense to, if you have family pictures and videos and things like that, pass on those things while you can, and then the people that have them know they've got them, and you don't have to worry about it so much.
Yeah, now that is perfectly good, but remember, do not pass them on by thinking, well, a great thing to do is for me to stick these up on Flickr, and then everybody can get to. No, because once again, you're stuck with the terms of service of whoever you're providing it to, and then you have the whole problem of, oh, well, look, it just vanished because you did. So don't do that. Yeah.
Put it on a 32 gig flash drive.
Oh, yeah.
And call it a birthday present.
They're all of, what, 10, 20 bucks now? I mean, they're ridiculously cheap. It's nothing. Go ahead.
I asked about these, and I bet Charles has the answer. My mother, when she passed, I have all these 78s, like big bands.
Yeah, yeah.
But I don't have anything to play on. How would I know there's USB.
Yes, there is.
Will they play?
Most of them only have 45 and 33 settings. You have to find somebody a little more dedicated who still has the 78 setting. Now, you can take that 78 and record it, digitizing it at the 45 setting, and then you can adjust the speed digitally. You're not going to get quite the sound quality, but what sound quality did you have on a 78?
Yeah, 78 anyway. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty far back. Yeah.
My suggestion is take that 78, throw it away, and buy the same song on iTunes.
If it's there. Yeah, you know. But you know, a lot of this stuff doesn't exist out there. It's just surprising how big holes there are in iTunes, even today. You just kind of go, wow, I didn't think that was that crazy of a thing. And
Also, with the 78 age, I have quite a few 78s because back in the day, there was the home recording system of literally engraving your own 78s. That was
Oh, that's cool.
recording. And my grandmother, who played organ at the church and played, you know, that made many 78s of her performances.
well, I didn't even know they made those.
In this, my generation, we have tons of stuff on cassette tape.
Yeah.
It's home recording, and you're not going to be able to replace that. So you do want to be able to digitize it.
Yeah, that's very cool. Other thoughts? Yeah.
We have Edison 80s, try that.
You may not want to you know, tell people that.
Will you do the same?
Actually, that's ridiculously simple because all you have to do is just plug in a, you know, you plug into the headphone, and then you take the other side and plug it into the microphone, and then set your yeah, or even QuickTime, new audio, and bang.
Specific USB.
Yep, there's another way to do that too.
Very inexpensive.
Yeah,
And
yeah. I mean, that's cassettes are snap. 8-track, however, that might be a little more interesting.
You have to do them in real time.
Yeah, which bites.
Record the entire cassette as one long track unless you are editing. It takes a little effort, but it's not that much.
Anything else for me? All right. I guess I'll turn this back over to Elizabeth for raffle, or what do we?
Thank you.
Yes, no problem.